It is party central at Constitution Dock tonight as sailors roll off yachts and into the nearest pub to toast completion of the Sydney-Hobart yacht race. Celebrations that are well deserved. At this stage, less than 60% of the starting fleet will make it. The best of them, the super maxi Blackjack.
This is what it takes to win the Sydney-Hobart. Blackjack entering Storm Bay last night, unrelenting effort in the face of a 25-knot southerly, then the agonising haul up the Derwent. Boat speed cut to 6 knots. But this is the reward. At 1:37 this morning, backslapping and handshakes all round, the cheers of the dockside crowd, and the sweet taste of victory. The slowest time in 17 years, 2 days, 12 hours, 37 minutes. Every second hard fought.
Yeah, it was tough in the beginning. The first 30 hours was pretty rugged, and then it lightened out. But yeah, great to get the win.
Confident from the get-go.
Pretty much after the start gun went, we had a pretty good feeling.
A first win for Blackjack's owner, Peter Harburg.
It was a fantastic effort. These guys have just sailed so well.
Skipper Mark Bradford seasick for the first 20 hours.
Oh, just internal problems. Mostly my stomach was coming out of my mouth.
Law Connect finished second, less than 3 hours behind. Scallywag only 15 minutes further back in third place.
It's a good boat race, though.
But no joyride.
I don't think I've ever done a race where we haven't had the spinnaker on. Like, it was upwind the whole way. So, yeah, pretty tough.
And over the coming days, Constitution Dock is just going to keep filling up. Behind these 3 super maxis, 49 other boats. And while that number might sound like a lot, it really isn't, considering 88 boats started this 1,200-kilometre race on Sunday. As of this morning, 37 yachts had retired with damage to sails, hulls, rigging, equipment and broken bones. Some crews here in Hobart will have little respite, turning around today to make New Year's Eve in Sydney. But first things first.
As soon as I finish talking to you, I'm having a beer.
And Tom Hartley joins us live from Hobart. Tom, good evening to you. Not over yet. There's still a few out there. How's the handicap competition?
Well, Michael, the action hasn't stopped this afternoon. You've got a couple of these mid-sized boats that have come in the past hour. There's Ichiban right beside Celestial. They finished about 15 minutes apart from each other, just waiting for the results of their rapid COVID tests at the moment. But all eyes are on Ichiban right now for a couple of reasons. I'll tell you why. Firstly, they're flying a protest flag. Now, the skipper won't tell us what that's about just yet, so watch that space, he says. Secondly, they're chasing another overall title, the Tattersall Cup. That would be their third if they pull this off, and why that's so huge, that hasn't happened for 57 years, Michael. So that would be a huge feat, especially among the yachting fraternity. Regardless, plenty to celebrate for them this afternoon. They'll be surely heading to the pub, joining the crews from Stefan and Whisper, another 2 of those bigger boats that got in this afternoon. 44 boats still out in the water, slogging it out, coming through the Bass Strait, down Tassie's east coast. A couple more about to turn into the Derwent. So, Michael, the action just has been non-stop, and it's sure to continue tonight.
Indeed. All right, on the dock there in Hobart, Tom Hartley, thank you.
A Sydney-based biotech firm has developed a world-first COVID vaccine that could be more effective than those currently available. Engenic uses nanocellular technology to stimulate a strong antibody response.
Not only has it been found to work against mutant strains, including Delta, it's also shown promising signs of long-lasting efficacy and doesn't require refrigeration. A trial is currently underway at Melbourne's St Vincent's Hospital. And Engenic co-CEO Dr Jennifer McDiamond joins us now. Morning to you. What makes this different to Pfizer or AZ?
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Well, it is very different. We have developed a nanocell where we load up a COVID spike protein, so it comes pre-packaged. The other vaccines, you have to make the spike protein when it's injected in the body and from any cell that it goes into. So that's different. We have also engineered our nanocells such that it takes a completely different pathway to develop an immune response. What that means is that we get high affinity antibodies developed. So they're like Velcro. When they see the spike protein, they stick and they don't come off. So when the spike protein mutates, they also stick, so that, because they bind very tightly. The other vaccines around, they're fine if the COVID is the Wuhan strain, but when they see a mutant, they attach and they wobble and then they fall off. The other thing is, I've got a little bottle here of ours. It can be it's presented as a dry powder. You just add water. There's no keeping it at minus 80 degrees like the other vaccines, and it has a shelf life of 3 or 4 years. We haven't even tested that yet, where the others run out of oomph within about 3 months. So that's very important. The other thing I should mention is that we have not had billions of dollars thrown at us like the others. That's a big difference.
Right, and you'd like it, I should imagine. But
that would be handy.
Yeah.
Yes.
The other important thing is that anyone can take it. It's even immunocompromised people. It ticks the box for them as well.
Yes, and that is important to us. We're going to do some trials in people with cancer, because the raison d'etre of our nanocell has always been to treat cancer patients, and we have trials going on at the moment. And cancer patients at a late stage have been bombarded with lots of different chemotherapeutics, and their immune system is frankly shot. When we put our nanocell into those people, we see an immediate, within 3 hours, rise in the white blood cell count. And the white blood cells are nothing other than immune cells. So these people have been eliminated in trials with all the existing vaccines, because they didn't want them to, they knew they wouldn't respond. But ours, I think we have a really good chance, and we're very interested in trialling it in people with cancer and HIV and other immune states. Yeah.
All right. Well, congratulations. Thanks for explaining it to us. Hope you get your funding, and health bureaucrats. This is one to look at. Appreciate your time. Thank you. And I love a researcher that replaces terms like efficacy with oomph. I can actually understand that. I can understand that.
I never want to hear that word again. I'm wobbly. I know.
Said to be the hottest New Year's Eve in 6 years, and with that comes serious concerns. Let's go live to Rosie Barnett. And Rosie, the CFS is preparing for severe bushfire conditions.
Yeah, that's right, Mike. We're about to enter our first heat wave of the summer, with several very hot days in a row, including Friday, which is set to reach 38 degrees for New Year's Eve. And that's left CFS crews bracing for the worst. There's currently high to severe fire danger warnings in place for almost all of SA over the next 3 days. And the Mount Lofty Ranges, Yorke Peninsula, the Murraylands and southeast are all of highest concern. It's predicted there'll be total fire bans in these regions, if not the entire state, and with many expected to be hosting backyard barbecues to bring in the new year. Authorities fear those conditions could be a recipe for disaster.
Certainly if there are bans, barbecues need to be electric or gas, certainly not solid fuel, Webbers and those sort of things for their lunch. Not trying to ruin New Year's Day by any stretch of imagination, but our volunteers would like to enjoy New Year's Day as well.
The increased fire dangers are going to be applicable to pretty well all districts.
The UV rating is also expected to be particularly high, so if you are planning on spending the day in the sun or at the beach, as always, the advice is to cover up, and there'll be little reprieve from that heat when the sun does go down, with the overnight temp to remain in the 20s to kick off 2022. Now, the good news is there will be a slightly cooler change coming through early next week, but Gertie will have all those weather details later this hour.
Good evening. COVID testing as we know it will soon be a thing of the past, with isolation rules about to undergo the most significant overhaul since the pandemic changed the way we live.
Leaders are hashing out a new battle plan to ease the restraints on close contacts as Queensland dumped its testing requirements for travellers. All on a day our COVID infections almost doubled.
In a system being pushed beyond breaking point, anger and frustration.
I just find it very hard to believe that we are in this position. Our hospital system is failing, our COVID tested system is failing.
The Maroubra testing centre full before opening, forcing police to turn away cars which had queued for hours.
Premier, not everybody is here because they're going on a holiday.
Unprecedented pressure on the testing centres, records smashed. Exactly 1 month since the state's first Omicron case. Numbers almost doubled overnight, from 6,000 yesterday to 11,000 today, and that an underestimate.
There's probably more disease in the community than the numbers reflect.
Record tests too, more than 150,000. It means 1 in 14 people in the queue is now testing positive.
We are at capacity.
But the Premier is still insisting there is optimism tonight. While 70 more have been hospitalised, the number in ICU is holding firm.
And we monitor that with our health teams every day, and we're very confident of the position that we are in.
The government has now officially abandoned the health advice of the last 2 years to test on the slightest concerns, to now only test if you're sick or told to by New South Wales Health.
There are some people who I think are genuinely worried, but they're well. The worried well should not be lining up for PCR tests.
Also helping to cut the queue numbers, Queensland announcing PCR tests are no longer required to cross the border. From this Saturday, a rapid antigen test is all that's needed, and it's an honesty system. Travellers only required to fill in a declaration.
And if they're found to be obviously making a false declaration, the fines are over $1,400.
If you're going to Queensland, you're in a queue right now, get out of the queue.
Fundamental changes to the testing system as we've known it, and there's more to come.
We're going through a gear change when it comes to how we manage testing arrangements, the definition of close contacts.
The new plan would see close contacts almost abolished, only those you live with, no fellow passengers, no fellow customers, no fellow workers.
You're dealing with a high volume of cases, and we just can't have everybody just being taken out of circulation because they just happen to be at a particular place at a particular time.
Positive cases would take a RAT test on day 6 and, if negative, be released on day 7. Just to be sure, they'd take another test on day 12. Household members would be offered RAT tests too, free from existing hubs.
And you can go to 2 lines and things of that nature. You wouldn't even necessarily have to take the test there. You could just take it home, and that means the lines would move much more quickly.
The only people in the other line, those with symptoms, who'd still qualify for free PCR tests.
So really what we're trying to do here is to go for the best bang for the buck, make sure that people that are queuing really need that test and are at a high likelihood of being positive.
I've seen some of the recommendations that have been put forward by the Commonwealth, and I support them.
But there's chronic supply issues for RAT tests. The state government has ordered another 30 million kits, the federal government another 50 million. But they're weeks away as the case numbers here explode.
We're seeing doubling every 2 to 3 to 4 days.
Of the 61 people currently in intensive care, the vast majority are unvaccinated, 41 patients in total, and just 2 had had their booster shot. More evidence, authorities say, of the effectiveness of the vaccines, which they're convinced will keep hospital numbers under control.
The Prime Minister has called another emergency National Cabinet meeting for tomorrow, pushing to get the new rules adopted in every state.
And Chris Reason joins us now. And Chris, this is a massive change to the test, trace and isolate system.
Yeah, and Marsh, good evening to you. This is effectively the state government announcing that it's now contact tracing DIY from this point forward, if you like. Chief Health Officer Dr Kerry Chant says that New South Wales health staff will not be playing detective like they have been for the last 2 years, interviewing thousands of cases and tracking where they've all been. With Omicron's numbers, that is just impossible. Instead, it will be up to us, telling our friends, acquaintances, using social media to let people know if you've tested positive. The other big change, of course, avoiding testing centres. We've had the message to get tested drilled into us now for 2 years. It's only if you're feeling unwell. It will leave many people anxious, and it's going to take some getting used to. Just quickly, Ange, too, a follow-up to that 7 News story last night where pregnant women were having to get PCR tests to access their hospital. Well, the Health Minister, Brad Hazzard, has moved quickly and officially scrapped that. Now all they need are rat tests. A welcome move.
Makes sense. Thanks, Rezo.
Well, they've been called the new toilet paper, but it's no joke for people desperate for supplies of rapid antigen tests. The quick do-it-yourself COVID kits have been stripped from pharmacy shelves as frustration grows at long queues and long waits for PCR test results.
Roselands, 3:45am. A testing queue was already forming, but elsewhere.
I got here at 2:30 in the morning.
It was about 2:30 I got here this morning.
And while they say the night is darkest before the dawn, the mood was pretty dark well after the sun rose.
I'm going to have to come back later. I'm so sorry.
They're not open till the 4th of January.
Okay.
How do you feel, sir, about the news?
Not good.
People who had queued for hours were turned away, and the looks on faces said everything. No different at Bella Vista.
You can go to Castle Hill.
Yesterday we went everywhere and everywhere was closed. So.
There was instant relief though once news broke Queensland no longer requires a PCR test, although some were at the front of the queue anyway.
So you're hoping to go before January 1? Hopefully, yeah. So it depends when we get back from here.
For those flying to Queensland today,
I think it'd be good if she did it a little bit earlier.
Resentment of the PCR Hunger Games it took to get here.
They shouldn't have been there in the first place. Really, are we one country or are we a series of states?
And now there's a new problem.
We couldn't get a rapid test. We tried to get a rapid test yesterday. We went to about 10 different places, sold out.
I couldn't buy one for 2 weeks.
At Burt's Pharmacy, Hunters Hill.
The little nasal swab, 1 centimetre up.
Hotelier Wayne Taranto bought 50 for his staff.
It's becoming harder at this point in time. A few weeks ago it was okay, now it's a requirement.
The demand has been massive. We're literally getting phone calls every 2 to 5 minutes, people coming off the street pleading.
From the CEO of SureScreen Australia, who confirmed himself positive today with his own test.
I could get 10 million here within 4 weeks if the government called, but we haven't heard anything.
The short supply of rapid tests has been an emerging problem for weeks now, and the Queensland government's decision only adds to demand. There is another issue, a backlog of testing products that have been approved overseas but are still waiting to be approved in Australia.
So we started the TGA process in late September.
But still no approval for a testing device Antiotex says should be deployed at airport check-ins across the country.
Our test and our system and our platform is going to help Australia for the long term. So the fact that we're not there right now is frustrating.
The Prime Minister will discuss subsidising RATs and providing more of them at National Cabinet.
Particularly those who are pensioners and others, we're looking at ways that we can provide concessional access for them.
Robert Ovadia, 7 News.
So New South Wales recorded 11,201 new cases of COVID in the 24 hours, and we had 157,758 tests. What that number reflects is some testing that's been obviously occurring and reflects some tests that have been conducted over previous days. So the numbers will jump around a little bit over coming days as we reflect testing numbers that have been performed over the Christmas and Boxing Day period. But I think what it is showing is that we are continuing to see a rise in cases of Omicron. We're seeing doubling every 2 to 3 to 4 days. But each of us have a role to play in suppressing the spread of the virus. Some of the key things we can do is not be out and about when we've got symptoms. Instead, go and get a test. And some of the changes that have been put in place around making sure that we preserve that fast testing capability that our residents have come to appreciate in New South Wales is restored by making sure that some of our low utility testing is not undertaken, and that we allow people to use RAT testing to give them that reassurance or for other settings. So we really want to focus our PCR testing on symptomatic individuals or people that have been clearly advised they need a test by public health. It is important that I'm aware that people are using RAT tests, and I appreciate them using RAT tests, and they're going to be an asset and a tool we use going forward. But it is important that you are linked into care if you have a positive RAT. Occasionally RAT tests will be false positives, and we wouldn't want you to think your symptoms were COVID related when they're actually something else that might need to be treated. That's one reason. And the other reason is there are therapies and medications and treatment, particularly if you fall into high risk groups. So if you're unvaccinated, you're pregnant, you've got chronic conditions, it really is important that you're linked into care so we can use some of those therapies, because using those therapies at the right time, and that's very early in your disease course, means that it will reduce your risk of hospitalisation and ICU. So I just encourage people, anyone who's got a positive RAT test should also go and get that PCR test and talk to their healthcare provider. As we move forward, our testing resources, whilst great through the labs, have actually been constrained by the fact that we've got more prevalent disease. And so when you have a higher positivity rate, it tells us two things. That we probably are not ascertaining, getting to all of the cases, so there's probably more disease in the community than the numbers reflect. But it also has impacts on our laboratory, and that's a good segue to Professor Dwyer that can talk about how when we've got that higher positivity rate, it means some of the techniques the laboratories have used to increase that lab throughput are no longer able to be used, and that's decreased our overall capacity. So, Professor Dwyer?
Thanks very much, Dr. Chan. So, look, the issue here from the laboratory point of view is how do we best use the PCR test to maximise its impact. So really we want to use these tests for people that are sick, the people that need to come into hospital, people that are advised by the Ministry of Health or the Department of Health to get tested. So they're really the people that best benefit with these tests. The PCR tests are the most sensitive, so the best ones to use in people who are ill and likely to end up in hospital. There are issues around getting these tests done in a timely fashion. That's because you need high throughput machines to do them. You need people to collect the samples. We use a lot of collecting centres around the state. Those queues for getting testing are getting out of control from the point of view of the laboratories being able to do the tests quickly. And for sick people, you want to do the tests as quickly as possible so you can treat them. The other thing is too that the number of staff, of course, in the laboratories is finite. This is highly technical work. We can't just pull these off a shelf, if you like, and do them. So there is pressure on the laboratories. So we want to reserve the laboratories for those people that are most ill and most in need of a test. The rapid antigen tests are also useful, not quite as sensitive as a PCR, but the ideal sort of test to use for people that don't have symptoms or that are worried about visiting their elderly parents or grandparents, that sort of environment, gathering together for functions. That's the situation where the rapid antigen tests are likely to be of great benefit. So I'd be happy to answer questions.
Do you want to talk about pooling?
So, yeah, one of the issues is around increasing capacity by pooling or combining specimens in the lab. That sort of process has worked really well over the last year and a half or so. But now that the number of positive cases in the community is so high, the ability to do that pooling is limited because you have to go back and retest them if they're positive. So we've lost that advantage to maximise our capacity through pooling. But as the Omicron kind of curve flattens out or decreases, we'll be able to go back to doing that and to provide the capacity that we need.
Professor Dwyer, explain what pooling actually is.
So what we mean by pooling is that, for example, if you have 20 tests that come into the lab, you can take, say, 4 or 6 of those or 2 of those and combine them and then do the PCR on that combined sample. So in other words, you can test 4 people at the same time. If that test is negative, then obviously all 4 samples in that pool are negative. If, however, it's positive, then you've got to go back and test each of those individual ones to see which one is a positive case, and which one, of course, is a negative case. And it's that process of going back and having to retest positive pools, that takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of effort, and it chews up reagents and so on as well. So the ability to pool is limited by how common the disease is in the community. And at the moment, with this Omicron surge, the numbers are too high to do pooling in a cost-effective and rapid manner.
I mean, you talked a lot about just before.
Just to answer the question, I just want to back some of those comments in, and we accept the difficulties in the fact that as we move through the next phase of the pandemic, that what we've been saying over the last 2 years in terms of going out and getting tested, and that's what we've encouraged, and that has been incredibly successful. As we move through this next phase, the messaging is changing and the direction is changing because it needs to. And what we need to have happen is that those PCR tests are there and available for those people who are unwell or advised to by New South Wales Health. What Professor Dwyer has just explained is that as those case numbers increase, as we move through this phase, that becomes even more important, because those who are unwell and who need those tests back, the time it is taking will naturally be longer if there are people in those queues getting tested unnecessarily. So we accept that this is a change in messaging. It is a very different position to the position that we've had over the last 2 years, and obviously that will take time to adjust. So we'll continue to say it as we move through this phase, but if you are not feeling unwell or have not been advised by New South Wales Health to do so, there is no need to be lining up for a PCR test anywhere across the state.
Is this an event that we just simply can't keep up? Is that what you're saying?
No, this is, as we go through this next phase, I mean, there are many positive signs here, many positive signs. We've seen that Delta that Omicron in relation to early reports is 1/5 as severe as Delta. That's incredibly positive. But there will naturally be challenges and inconveniences as we move through each stage of this pandemic. So what has been crucial and key in our state has been the vaccination rate. We have one of the highest vaccination rates, not just in the country, but the world, and that's provided us protection. And it's pleasing to see that as those case numbers, certainly much, much higher than they were under Delta, but we're still seeing very stable ICU presentations. There is strong capacity in our health system, and that is only due to the fact that everyone across our state, or almost everyone across our state, has made that effort. But when the circumstances change, so does our response, so does the messaging of the government, and so does the direction. And naturally, as cases increase, people will want to feel that need to get tested. And over the last 2 years, that's been the approach, and it's been the right approach. But as we move through this next phase, it's very important. If you don't feel unwell, you don't need a PCR test.
You talk a lot about the need to balance health and the economy.
Yep.
Now got spiraling times, cases are almost doubling. You've had to backtrack on some of the restrictions you moved earlier. You've got to balance what happened.
Well, we've always made the view. We've said this from the outset. As we've gone through this phase, every press conference the Health Minister and I are at, we will tailor our settings to the circumstances we find ourselves in. We have said, as we open up, the alternative was to simply remain closed. The success and our pact with the people of New South Wales has been get vaccinated, which everyone has done in record numbers, and now we're able to open up. Now, as we open up, case numbers were going to increase. Every press conference we said case numbers will increase. Now they're increasing. We need to learn to live alongside the virus, and we're doing just that. Now, in the meantime, there will be inconveniences as naturally as a society we adjust to these new settings, and that's okay. But we just need to do what we can to alleviate that pressure on testing. I think the changes that have been made today from other premiers will make a real difference. There are some other changes we're looking at as well from a New South Wales government end, and I also think in addition to the approach from the National Cabinet tomorrow will also alleviate some of that pressure. And I particularly had a discussion with the Prime Minister this morning in relation to the procurement of rapid antigen tests. So we here in New South Wales have put in an order, as I've said, of 20 million. Today we're putting in another order of an additional 30 million tests. So this will provide great support to our state as we move through the next phase, but we'll work very closely with the Commonwealth Government for a national approach in terms of distribution. And as we move through the next phase, it will become the norm. It will become the norm that we have rapid antigen tests at home, or we purchase them at the pharmacy, potentially from the GP, And what that means, if you're going into a high-risk setting, if you're visiting an elderly loved one, that you would take one of those tests. So that will be the new norm as we move through 2022.
A Sydney-based biotech firm has developed a world-first COVID vaccine that could be more effective than those currently available. Engenic uses nanocellular technology to stimulate a strong antibody response.
Not only has it been found to work against mutant strains, including Delta, it's also shown promising signs of long-lasting efficacy and doesn't require refrigeration. A trial is currently underway at Melbourne's St Vincent's Hospital. And Engenic co-CEO Dr Jennifer McDiarmid joins us now. Morning to you. What makes this different to Pfizer or AZ?
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Well, it is very different. We have developed a nanocell where we load up a COVID spike protein, so it comes pre-packaged. The other vaccines, you have to make the spike protein when it's injected in the body and from any cell that it goes into. So that's different. We have also engineered our nanocells such that it takes a completely different pathway to develop an immune response. What that means is that we get high affinity antibodies developed. So they're like Velcro. When they see the spike protein, they stick and they don't come off. So when the spike protein mutates, they also stick so that, because they bind very tightly. The other vaccines around, they're fine if the COVID is the Wuhan strain, but when they see a mutant, they attach and they wobble and then they fall off. The other thing is, I've got a little bottle here of ours. It can be it's presented as a dry powder. You just add water. There's no keeping it at minus 80 degrees like the other vaccines, and it has a shelf life of 3 or 4 years. We haven't even tested that yet, where the others run out of oomph within about 3 months. So that's very important. The other thing I should mention is that we have not had billions of dollars thrown at us like the others. That's a big difference.
Right, and you'd like it, I should imagine. But
that would be handy.
Yeah.
Yes.
The other important thing is that anyone can take it. It's even immunocompromised people. It ticks the box for them as well.
Yes, and that is important to us. We're going to do some trials in people with cancer because the raison d'etre of our nanocell has always been to treat cancer patients, and we have trials going on at the moment. And cancer patients at a late stage have been bombarded with lots of different chemotherapeutics, and their immune system is frankly shot. When we put our nanocell into those people, we see an immediate, within 3 hours, rise in the white blood cell count. And the white blood cells are nothing other than immune cells. So these people have been eliminated in trials with all the existing vaccines because they didn't want them to, they knew they wouldn't respond. But ours, I think we have a really good chance, and we're very interested in trialling it in people with cancer and HIV and other immune states. Yeah.
All right. Well, congratulations. Thanks for explaining it to us. Hope you get your funding, and health bureaucrats. This is one to look at. Appreciate your time. Thank you. And I love a researcher that replaces terms like efficacy with oomph. I can actually understand that. I can understand that.
I never want to hear that word again. I was wobbly. I know.